Good morning, Ignite Church Online. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I'm so glad that you have clicked on this link, have allowed me to come into your home, your phone, your car. You better not be driving, wherever it is that you are, as we continue our At the Movie series. Now, if you did just pull this up and you didn't know what you were pulling up or what you were clicking, my name is Jason Lomberg. I'm the head pastor of Ignite Church, and we are doing a series right now in our church called At the Movies. It's been a tradition for our church family for many, many years, and if you're wondering what is it and what does it mean, we take a few weeks out of the year every year to take some of the best, most moving, most spiritually charged works of art in the secular world, films and shows that we really feel like speak to us, and we show our church, like, where is the gospel in this? Where are the truths of Scripture in this? The reality is, when you see something and it really moves you, when it really stirs your heart, when there's a show and you keep coming back to it, you don't even know why you keep coming back to it, I guarantee you it's because it is a reflection of biblical truth. It is a reflection of this thing that God put inside us that draws us towards themes like justice and love and mercy and sacrifice and grace and purity. Like we keep coming back hungry for those things because we're spiritual beings made by God. And even though these films that we've been looking at and will look at today were not made with the intention of being something that drives us to Christ or spiritually elevates us, the fingerprints of Jesus are all over them. And so thank you for being with us this morning. Last week, we started our At the Movies with an incredible kids film by Disney Plus called Raya, The Last Dragon. If you hadn't seen that, you should go check it out. A clear story of the gospel. Today, we're actually going to be looking, so I'm a nerd, and if you didn't know that about me, then that means you're new to our church, but I'm a huge nerd. This is maybe my favorite of the three that we're doing, believe it or not. It's not Star Wars. We are doing a Star Wars show, but it's not. We're going to be looking at WandaVision today. Wanda and Vision are both two characters in the Marvel universe. So if you're not a comic book person, you don't know who they are. That's completely okay. You do not need to be a nerd to enjoy what we're going to look at today, because we're not really looking at these characters and we're not really looking at their superhero battles. We're going to be looking at some of the spiritual themes that we find in this incredible show called WandaVision. If you haven't checked it out, it's also on Disney Plus. It's excellent. There are a few scary elements if you have kids, but generally speaking, I think it would be okay for older kids to watch this with their parents. We tried really hard to pick shows that you could watch as a whole family. This is a show and not a movie, so it's an 8-hour commitment if you were going to kind of binge it, but it's so moving and so powerful. Today, what we're going to be doing, just like we did last week, if you weren't with us, we're going to be looking a little bit at that film, but because we're online, we can't show clips. Now, if you have the ability to come live to Ignite Church, if you're within that driving distance that can make it to see us, you need to come live to Ignite Church. It's an incredible experience. We have so much fun. There are characters in our lobbies, and we directly pull pieces of these films and shows to show you, like, see the spirituality in this, and it's so powerful. We can't do that online because of copyright issues. And so what I'm going to be doing, just like I did last week, is take some of the themes that we find in this journey that a young woman named Wanda, also known as the Scarlet Witch, is going on with a biblical character named Habakkuk. If you've seen the show WandaVision, you'll know that what this show really is all about, what this incredible production really consists of, is a person traveling through grief. Now, Wanda is an incredible superhero. She's a part of the Avengers, which is a superhero group. And Wanda, her abilities are incredibly unique and special. As a matter of fact, being completely honest with you, out of all the characters that so far have been introduced by the Marvel Universe, she is the most powerful one, because what Wanda can do is, and it's terrifying to even say this, she can literally create matter. She can make things around her. She can shift, the reality around her. And she does this sometimes without even knowing that she's doing it or meaning to do it. And so imagine being around someone who can twist things and not always know that they're twisted. Now, for our live audience, I'm going to be using a very specific episode, the final episode of the series WandaVision, and talking about the lies that this woman created around herself that she was believing to be reality right up until the last episode. And as believers, we often surround ourselves with lies and distortions of truth that we hold to be real, that we hold to be true. And when that happens, the enemy can do all kinds of things in our life. And so it's going to be a powerful word for them, but for you guys, we wanted to make exclusive content just for our online community because you can't see the clips. And so not just taking an episode, but looking at the series as a whole. And that's what's so cool that I get to do with you. We're not looking at one episode. I wanted to do one episode for our live audience so they could find the clips that I'm going to be using. It'd be too hard to do it over the whole series. I get to look with you at the whole series. What is this about? Why was this produced? What is the theme of this? What is the heart of this? And it really is about grief. And if you have no idea what grief feels like, if you've never experienced it, you are a particularly blessed person, you're a particularly young person, or you're just a particularly good liar to yourself, because grief is a universal human condition. We all lose things that we love. We all lose things that are meaningful to us. And at the heart of this entire show, full of wonders and magic and powers and battles and great dialogue, some of the best dialogue, by the way, if you haven't seen it, for sure, of any action movie. It's right up there with it's just good. It's just really good. Do yourself a favor and watch it. But in the midst of it, it's really all about a woman who is grieving the loss of her husband. The only thing you need to know about Wanda and about Vision is a man, Wanda's a woman, and Vision has died. And Wanda is grieving him and has lost him. And in her loss, she creates this world for herself where he is still alive. When you look in the scriptures at the prophet Habakkuk, just to give you a little context for what we're going to be talking about today, he was one of the minor prophets. He was someone who served in the temple in Jerusalem. And the particular time in history in which he served and in which he was active was one of the darkest times in history for the nation of Israel. It was after Solomon's long past. There have been so many evil kings, both in the southern area of Israel, Judah, and in the northern area of Israel called Israel. And that God has proclaimed, the destruction of his people if they wouldn't come back to him over and over and over again. So God's given them chance after chance after chance after chance. Come back to me or you'll be destroyed. And when Habakkuk is really active, northern Israel has already been conquered and destroyed. But the people of God are still very active in the southern part of Judah. And what God reveals to Habakkuk is this reality that a very powerful king named Nebuchadnezzar, a very powerful, military might, army, country named Babylon, they are coming. And they are going to destroy the last remnant of Israel, in a sense. So the nation will no longer exist. It will become a province of the nation of Babylon. And we know in history that did come to pass, that Babylon conquered Israel. If you love the stories of Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, this, of course, is a result of Babylon coming and conquering Judah. So to kind of put you in history, that's what's going on. It is a dark, dark day. And this prophet Habakkuk, who loves God and who loves Israel and who loves his country, he is grieving the loss of his country. And he's wondering, how does God fit into all this? How does spirituality fit into all of this destruction? And so if you haven't already, go ahead and pull out the Ignite Church app. My outline will be right there for you guys, and we want you to follow along with it. And the first point is this, the driving question of grief. This is the question that when we're grieving and we've lost something, if we're really honest with ourselves, this is the question that's at the heart of it. Why doesn't life seem fair? You see, there's a difference between mourning, I believe, and between grief. We mourn someone even if we know that everything's okay, even if they're passing, the loss was a good loss, a positive. We can mourn things in an extremely healthy way. When we're grieving, we have to be so careful, because grief can so easily be twisted and turned and embittered. And usually, by my definition, when we're grieving, it's because in some sense, something was taken from us that doesn't seem fair. Now, of course, that can be a life was taken. That's what we typically often think in the case of grief. It could be that a job was taken. It could be that an opportunity was taken. It could be that a love and relationship was taken from you. Whatever it is, when we grieve, we're wrestling with this thing like, this doesn't feel fair. This doesn't seem fair. And just if you're asking that question over anything, I'll let you know it might not be fair. And that's why if we're not really careful, the voice of our enemy can whisper how unfair something is, and it can really twist our view on what fair is. That before even going into the scriptures, you know this. I know you all know this. Like, if we got what we deserved, it would not be good. Life has never been fair. Grace is not fair. And so Habakkuk is looking out at all the death around him, and all the destruction around him, and all the pain around him, and he's questioning life. He's questioning himself, and he's questioning God. So if you look with me at Habakkuk 1, starting with verse 2, and we'll go to verse 3, it says, How long, O Lord, must I call for help, and you do not listen? Or cry out to you violence, but you don't save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrong? And so the prophet's being so real with God here, which I love. Like, I love the fact that this man who is deeply devoted to God and deeply in love with God, he understands and knows God well enough. I don't have to be polite with you. Like, I don't understand. This doesn't seem right and fair. Yes, we're not perfect as a nation. Yes, we're so flawed as people, but we are your people. We are the closest thing to a holy people that exist on earth. It just isn't fair that we're the losers and everybody else is the winners. It isn't fair that I'm seeing people that I love taken from me. It isn't fair that I see the power that we once had shrinking day by day. It doesn't feel fair. And when Wanda, this character that WandaVision is really all about, has to lose her husband, of course, it's all fantastical and fictional, but in a previous movie, because everything's connected in the Marvel Universe right now in some form or fashion, she lost her husband in one of the worst ways possible. There was an enemy that coveted a power that her husband had, and this power was literally inside, and Vision was an artificial life form. And so I know that's kind of nerdy, but that's what he was. And so they had this thing inside him called the Mind Stone that was a very powerful thing, and this other being wanted it for himself. And so the crux of one of the movies, this thing has to be destroyed, and Wanda, her power is the only power strong enough to destroy it. And so in this incredibly moving, sad twist of fate, she has to kill the person she loves. Like, he dies right in front of her, to try to keep this bad guy from destroying the world and the universe as we know it. So that's unfair. And then after she goes through the pain of doing that, this enemy has an ability that kind of reverses time for a moment, undoes the thing that she does to save the world, and then she kills her husband again in front of her. So this is a woman that has lost her husband 2 different times right in front of her face. She's grieving, she's mourning, and she just wants him back. And when someone with her power wants him back, she creates this thing around her without even realizing she did it, and he's back. And if you do choose to go into it and you're thoroughly confused with episode 1, take heart, keep watching the whole thing, because what she does is basically create a world that is reminiscent of sitcoms that she enjoyed watching when she was young. And so you start like in the 50s, Beaver Cleaver, and like that was a safe place. And it moves into the 60s, and it's more Brady Bunch, and in the 70s, and you go through the 80s and the 90s. It's Malcolm in the Middle is, that like her whole life. One of the escapes we find out about Wanda as a human, just because she's not just a hero, she's a human, is that she found escape and comfort in these family sitcoms. So when she creates this world unknowingly, she puts herself in a sitcom, and it's one where he is alive, and all of a sudden her grief for a moment seems covered, but because it's a lie, the grief is still there. She's not dealing with it. She's not allowing herself to properly mourn. Instead, she's trying to twist herself in reality to avoid the hurt that she is feeling. And in the same way, Habakkuk is wrestling with God. And what he's doing, I'd say, is a very appropriate, healthy thing to do in the midst of mourning, in the midst of grief. Instead of trying to convince himself it's not real, and instead of trying to ignore what's going on around him, he's running right to the source and saying, God, I don't understand this. He's wrestling with the right thing. And when you even look at his name, there's a place there in your outline, you can write this down. His name means to embrace or to wrestle. So the name of this prophet literally means to struggle. So he's struggling with God. He's struggling with himself. He's struggling with the world around him. And I want you to know it's okay to struggle. It's okay to feel that life isn't fair. God isn't intimidated or scared about that. As a matter of fact, God brings power and answers and provision and grace and love in the midst of that. And so not only should you watch WandaVision, you should really read the entire book of Habakkuk, because we can't go through all of it today, but it's so powerful and good. Continuing on in this story, we read this incredible thing that God does. It's, God's response to this story, and it's not a response that Habakkuk was looking for or that anyone would expect, but it's true and it's real and it's good. In Habakkuk 1:5, it says, "Look at the nations and watch." Habakkuk 1:5, "Look at the nations and watch. Be utterly amazed." God says, "I'm going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told." And so as Habakkuk is wrestling with God and asking these questions of why God, why God, why God, it's interesting. God doesn't give him just an immediate answer. And by the way, I really do believe that God still is. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. You can come to him with questions. He's not intimidated by them. But usually when we come with questions like those why questions, he usually doesn't answer why. He just says watch. Watch what I'm about to do. Watch where I'm about to go. Often our journey through grief, our journey through bitterness, our journey through faithlessness, those things, if we're willing to journey with God through those things, it's a gateway to seeing God do something amazing. One of these powerful quotes from WandaVision that when I heard it, I was just like, oh my gosh, you couldn't believe this was in a Marvel, series, a Marvel film. There's a period where Wanda is being forced, in some regards, relive a lot of the hurt of her life, a lot of people being taken from her. This is a woman who has known loss her entire story and her entire life. And there's this moment where in real life, she's remembering sitting down with the man who would be her love, Vision, and talking about grief and talking about loss. And she's struggling with pain. And again, he's an artificial life form, so he doesn't feel some of those things. And he says this, and I just wanted to read it for you. It's so good. He asked her this question. He says, well, it can't be all sorrow, can it? I've always been alone, he's speaking of himself, so I don't feel the lack. It's all I've ever known. I've never experienced loss because I've never had a loved one to lose. And then he looks at her and he says, but what is grief if not love persevering? So she's wishing that she didn't feel the way she felt in this moment. She's wishing she didn't have these memories of this loss. And I can see him, he's saying, I've never had anyone to lose, but I envy your loss. Because the fact that you feel grief, the fact that you feel loss, it means that person that you've lost, that love you feel for them, it's enduring. It's persevering. It still lives. That person still lives in you. Their life still lives in you. The connection you made with them is still very real inside of you. And so we have this one person that's wishing they could forget. And you have this other person saying, I wish I could feel what you're feeling. Because to feel what you're feeling means that this person's become immortalized in your life and in your story. And it's a different perspective. And that's exactly what God is trying to say to Habakkuk. Listen, you're looking at this from the wrong perspective. You're wondering why. And I'm telling you to watch. Because this faithful God that you've loved and trusted, he is always, always, always at work. That word for amazed, because he says look and be amazed. It's the word tamah. And what it literally means, tamah in Hebrew, it means a sudden, alarming amazement, to be astonished, or, and this is a little badump bump, or to marvel. You're welcome, Marvel Studios. It's to marvel at something. It's amazing. So if you talk, why you're in amazement and you're marveling over something that you cannot believe. And to give you the details, what is this thing that they can't believe? Well, it's not necessarily a good thing, but it's a thing that's going to raise up incredible men like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Habakkuk 1:6-9, he says, I'm raising up the Babylonians, those ruthless and impetuous people who swept across the whole earth to seize the dwelling places that are not their own. They are feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves, and they promote their own honor. Their horses are swifter than leopards. They're fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their cavalry gallops headlong. The horsemen come from afar. They fly like a vulture, swooping to devour. And they come all bent on violence. And so Habakkuk is saying, God, why am I seeing all the pain? And God's saying, oh, you haven't seen anything yet. You haven't seen anything yet. The worst is yet coming. The worst is yet coming. You're going to see more hurt. You're going to see more pain. I think it's important for us to remember that we can try to create this world around ourselves like Wanda does all throughout the show, WandaVision. But the truth is, this is God's world. This is God's life. We don't get to make it on our own. Now, he's given us love and free will. He's made us, his children, as close to him as any created being ever could be. But it's so important for us when we're experiencing loss, when we're experiencing grief, when we're experiencing hurt, when we're asking these questions that it seems like God's so unfair. It's important for us to remember God's not unfair. This is his world. This is his life. This is all his story. But what I'm tempted to do and what you're tempted to do, just as Wanda did, is try to create our own reality and our own story where we get to decide the narrative. Listen, you can live in that life you want to, but the truth is so much more beautiful because we, standing outside the story, we get to see that even as the Babylonians were going to come down, God was still going to be faithful. And God was still going to protect, and God was still going to work miracles. He hasn't changed, and his vision for humanity hasn't changed. And it's so powerful if you ever go and look in the book of Daniel, over and over and over again, these foreign, wicked kings, they have moments where they're praising the true God of heaven. And so God took his reality from Israel and spread it to a people that didn't deserve it. That's what our God does. Whenever we're experiencing pain, there's something bigger going on beyond us if we will have eyes to see it. So as we look at this narrative of grief, if any of you who are watching this are experiencing loss, you're experiencing grief, all that happy saying about God doing something somewhere else, I know it doesn't take away your pain. I know it doesn't solve your problem. But I did want to give you a truth for you to consider and to chew on. And Habakkuk wrestles with this truth, and Wanda in this series has to wrestle with this truth. And I'm so thankful that at the end of her journey, she kind of embraces this truth. And so if you want to write this down, this is the truth. We have to accept the truth of today while believing in a hope for tomorrow. If we're going to get through grief, we have to accept the truth that we're in today. We can't deny it. We can't brush past it. We can't sweep it under a rug. We can't try to twist it or lie our ways out of it. We have to embrace the truth for what it is today. But no, because the Holy Spirit lives in us, because our God is so good, he's such a great provider, he's so present, he's so powerful, he's so loving, he's so very real, that even when we're hurting today, and that's the truth, there's hope for tomorrow. There's new grace for tomorrow. There's new opportunities and love for tomorrow. And of course, as we consider the tomorrow that is eternity, oh my gosh, we're heading to a place where God wipes away our tears and we're never going to cry again. God removes our pain and we're never going to hurt again. And God heals our loss and we're never going to lose anything ever again. Like, that is where you and I are headed. And so in the midst of grief today, we can find a special hope and looking toward tomorrow, both in eternity and in the things God has for us here. Because if you're still here and I'm still here, God has something he wants to do in and to and through us. So let me read this kind of finish of the first chapter of Habakkuk. Again, God hasn't solved the problem. He hasn't brought this prophet through everything, but we see this hope even present in the midst of the darkness and grief and loss that seems to surround this man. He says, "O Lord, are you not from everlasting, my God, my Holy One?" This is 1:12 through 1:14, by the way. This is my God, my Holy One. We will not die. So he's already pronounced like, I know that in the end, you're going to be faithful and you're going to keep your people unto yourself. It says, "O Lord, you've appointed them, that's the Babylonians, to execute judgment. O Rock, you've ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong." So this is where we see in the hope of the prophet. He's like, I know who you are. I know what you're doing. I see you have a bigger picture. But then right along here, we see the humanity of this truth. He says, but then why do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while wicked swallow up those who are more righteous than themselves? To be a man or woman of faith, I believe, especially in times of hurt and loss, grief and mourning, is to balance these realities that we always have so much to be hopeful for, but we always have to be willing to embrace the truth of the hurt that's with us. If we ignore either one and put anyone out of balance, we become something other than what God meant for us to be in the midst of this moment. So some of you are hurting right now, and I want you to know, man, I take that so seriously. Let us pray for you in the comment line if you get a chance. Let us share your hurt and walk with you in your hurt. We're a large church, but we want to, in small ways, gather with you and love with you and pray for you and be the hands and feet of Jesus to you if you'll let us. So don't ignore that. But at the same time, don't lose sight that there is a hope that we're walking towards, and it is so, so good. And as we get into the last episode, which if you were only going to watch one episode, I'd say watch the last episode. You'll be thoroughly confused, but it's okay. Once you see the end of it, I think it can kind of all connect the dots, especially with what I've told you about WandaVision and kind of the journey that Wanda is going on. But in the very, very, very end, it's in the last, kind of minutes of the film, Wanda realizes, like, I created this lie around me. It is not good. It is not healthy. This being that's here who looks like my husband and sounds like my husband, that's not my real husband. My real husband's gone. He died. And I can try to create some version of him, but I never can grasp the truth of who he really is. Like, I can't, I'm a created being. I can't make a soul. And she begins to realize that, and she has to let him go. And in the scene where she lets him go, there's so many beautiful moments. But again, in that scene, Vision speaks these words that leave us with such a strong sense of hope as he's beginning to fade away from Wanda and kind of disintegrate into these pieces that are like light flying into the air. He speaks to her and he says, I've been a voice with no body. And those of you who are Marvel fans, you'll remember Vision started off as just kind of an AI for Tony Stark, the Iron Man. He was this kind of thing that helped Iron Man run his suits, this disembodied voice named Jarvis. So he starts, I've been a voice with no body. I've been a body, but not human. So when Wanda loved him, he was this synthetic life form, artificial life form. He says, and now I'm a memory made real. And he looks at her and he smiles. He says, who knows what I might be next? Who knows what I might be next? Like, I've been this and I've been this and I've been this. It's just like, it's not goodbye. It's farewell. Because who knows how I'm going to show up next? Man, that's powerful. Whatever you're going through and whatever you're dealing with, who knows what you're going to be next? Who knows what God has for you next? And in the end, my goodness, the scriptures speak as to what is next for us. And you and I have the blessing through the blood of Jesus of being a being. One day you're going to be a being that angels will bow down to. That's what's waiting next for us. So do not let your circumstances press you and crush you. Do not let your grief overwhelm you because you've traveled through so many things and your journey's not over. And who knows what you might be next. I hope that whatever you're walking in, you can accept the truth of the day, but always have a special hope for what God has for you tomorrow. Watch WandaVision. You'll see it all throughout there. I hope it's been a blessing to you, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us at the movies.
Wow, thanks so much, Pastor Jason. What an incredible message. We're so excited for the steps that maybe you're taking today as you hear this word from God. And one of the best ways that you can let us know the next step that you need to take in your walk with Christ is just to scan this QR code or go to ignitechurch.com/QR. On that is a link that will take you to next steps that you can take in your walk with Christ. And it lets us know so we can walk with you through that. We believe that you can't do life alone, and that's the best way to take your next step today. Now, don't forget, download the Ignite Church app to get connected to what God's doing here. And don't forget, let us know how we can pray for you below, or go to ignitechurch.com/prayer. This has been such a fun and exciting day. We can't wait till next week. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time here at Ignite Church Online.